All right, hello. Welcome back to Declassified. Readings of this specific document is Cryptological Aspects of ESP, and I'm on chapter 4 here, so I'm just going to get right into it. ESP and earlier Soviet research. After a careful study of numerous CIA and FTD reports of Soviet ESP research, the following general information concerning such research was derived. Between 1960 and 1966, Russian ESP research went from a position of official toleration to considerable official support. The research plan of Russia research is reported to be to find out who are suitable subjects for ESP research, determine the proper conditions for successful ESP experiments, develop the biophysics of ESP, study the electromagnetic spectrum as a possible transmission source, study field and wave theories as they may be applicable to ESP, understand ESP from the cybernetics point of view. No detailed results of ESP experimental success have been published in recent open Soviet literature. However, the effort being expanded by the Soviets in this field and the range of uses which they envision for ESP indicates that some meaningful results have been produced by their efforts. It is interesting to note that recent Soviet publications of ESP research have lacked the more detailed quality of the professional report and have tended to be more general and aimed at propagandizing. The amount of research effort being expended by the Soviets is indicated by the number of personnel and institutions apparently involved in ESP research. These include Moscow, Biological Information Section of Moscow Scientific Technical Society of Radio Engineering, in parentheses, Department of Technical Parapsychology, Dr. E.K. Naumov, AMS Smirnov, Dr. Professor Sig Gerstian, A.S. Pressman, A.I. Potekin, V.A. Koldov, Mr. Martin Wadham, in parentheses, 50 scientists in all. Institution of Problems of Transmission of Information, Dr. D.G. Mirza, Director, Dr. Smirnov, Ms. Kisilova, Mr. I.V. Mirzalis. Unassigned Eugen Fadev and Y.U. Markoniko. Leningrad University Telepathy Laboratory, 8 rooms in parentheses. Professor Vasiliev. I don't know what the DEC means in parentheses. Professor P.V. Tarantiv, Professor A.D. Alexandrov, Professor Perov, Director P.I. Golyev, and Director P.I. Bull, 15 scientists in all. Kiev, Biocybernetics Department of the Institute of Cybernetics, Academy of Sciences, Ukraine, SSR, Kiev, Dr. Professor N.M. Amozov, Director D.R.B.B. Kazinskiv, Professor N.A. Rayevsky, Psychologist Dr. T.A. Tomovisovuk, Dr. Petrov, Mr. L.I. Pluchk, 12 people in all. I'm not going to read the rest of them. I'm going to go right into the reading the paragraphs. The following possibilities for using ESP are being considered by the Soviets. Some Soviet scientists consider that ESP could be accomplished with the help of a still unknown type of energy or a factor inherent only to the highest form of development of matter, the substances and structure of the brain. The discovery of this type of energy, there's a lot of typos in these documents, or factor would be the equivalent of the discovery of atomic energy. Some of these scientists feel an unknown energy, possibly akin to gravity and neutrinos, is involved. They also feel that in the future machines on the moon or in the ocean will be controlled by thought. Such ideas are not mere idle speculation. This type of energy is considered serious by such diverse minds as Soviet N.A. Kozyrev and the French scientist philosopher Teilhard de Chardin. Experiments are carried out by the by Jule Eisbund, MD, in the United States, and Dr. Bernard Grade of Canada, tend to substantiate the theory that such energy exists. So right there we have people working on it, while the paper actually says that the Soviets are just starting to work on it. However, again, there are multiple documents that exist outside of this one, almost 600 in total, that are declassified. So there's probably hundreds more that are still classified, showing that research has been going on since the 30s and 20s, as well as documents associated with this one that were derived or developed after this paper specifically was released. Continuing reading, Dr. Eugene B. Konecki, Director of Biotechnology and Human Research at NSA's Office of Advanced Research and Technology, stated during the 14th Congress of the International Astronautical Federation, 1963, that the Soviets are giving top priority towards the study of electromagnetic communications between living organisms under their manned space program. Dr. Konecki confirmed that NASA is pursuing similar research. So I think that actually references, I think, is astronaut Edgar Mitchell talking about astronauts using astral plane or meditation practices to actually travel. And then in recent, what might be considered more, I don't want to say esoteric because it's not, but you have a couple personalities and media personalities and researchers who have people on their shows and in their media that reference secret space programs and secret ways of traveling. And that certainly could be derived from the more ancient or lesser known methodologies from astral projection, meditation, or using architecture via the Masonic traditions, or using sound and architecture via the ancient Asian traditions in order to activate or utilize these specific mind pathways. And I'm just going to use that term for now. So on to reading. A report, there's a part blocked out that's been sanitized. A report, sanitized, stated, from the talks of the prominent scientists, I could gather that research in the field of telepathy is being conducted from the point of view of defense, quite actively, particularly in the problem of transmission of information and in the problem of guiding the movement of intercontinental rockets using pigeons. This would be an emergency measure to counter jamming, intentional or unintentional. Presumably, the transmission of information could also be concerned with the transmission of Soviet agent communications or the intercept of Western defense information. Thought control is another area in which the Soviets are trying to utilize telepathy. Many modern psychologists and psychiatrists believe that the unconsciousness of man, in which ESP operates, provide part of the information which is used by men to make decisions or form opinions. The Soviets would like to influence this unconscious information, fill, and thus influence world attitudes as well as those of their own citizens. Sanitized, stated B.B. Kaczynski has evolved a system of using telepathy in education, not only for knowledge, but also for transforming characters. Sanitized states that the Soviets have extended Pavlovian experiments into individual human beings, to groups, and even to societies. They are utilizing electronic computers in their experiments at giving them control of entire populations. So that's interesting, one, because everyone's glued to the internet and their phones. Two, in the previous video, I expounded briefly on MIT researchers, or not in this previous video, but at one of my other videos, I expounded on MIT researchers showing their documents where they could sync up mobile phones and then thereby sync up people's brains through EEG using the mobile phones. And then, of course, the documents on screen here on the right, which Elena Freeland's Under an Ionized Sky was published in 2018. And then we have a congressional bill, which is Bill 107 HR 2977, which shows that they are banning specific usage of weapons in one area but not banning them in another area, and then they outline the weapons they're using. So I'll continue reading. Some developments in Soviet ESP research include a successful telepathy transmission of 12 out of 25 pictures from Moscow to Novosibirsk, 6 of which were satisfactorily received and 3 very good. TASS 9, October 1966. So that's when they tried those. A successful telepathy experiment in which the hypnotized subject was made to fall asleep or awaken in 4 out of 5 tries. Same reference. TASS 9, October 1966. A nationwide telepathy experiment is to be carried out within the next few months of 1967. All Soviet citizens have been alerted to this test, which will originate telepathy transmission from Moscow at scheduled times. This test has been characterized by CIA as a nationwide talent hunt. And then we have an appendix bibliography. So we're looking at some excerpts from books from the CIA. So I'm going to read those through. Excerpt prepared February 14th in 1967. The CIA, another one, 1967. Another excerpt from USSR National Affairs, and then CIA info report. Subject: added comments on Dr. Smirnov's interest in parapsychology, 1965. Heavy emphasis on parapsychology program extension of Pavlovian experiments to whole populations, 1962. So the CIA was already doing that, what Russia is doing. CIA info report. Czech parapsychologists report on visit to Biokobrnati's laboratory, personnel involved and programs encountered, January 1962. CIA scan, new telepathy research section, 1966. Studies in mental telepathy, Leonid Vasilov, Gospodizdat, Publishing House, Moscow. French Estimates of Soviet Science, 1966. So I think CIA scan means they've added these documents into their own bibliography, and then I think the scan is just the scan date. Continuing reading. The laying on of hands implications of psychotherapy and the placebo effect. Corrective Psychiatry and Journal of Social Therapy. Bernard Grad, Volume 12, 1966, pages 192 through 204. The Man with a Camera Brain, True Magazine, Jewel Eisenbound, MD, January 1967, pages 37 through 124. Thought Transference, Aviation Week in Space Technology, October 7th, 1963. Just a word on that. So the Aviation Week in Space Technology, there are tests in CIA classified documents on the CIA CREST library where the tests for the Air Force and the tests for the Navy, I think, began with the notion of gremlins. And the notion of gremlins, not the popular movie from the 1980s, but the notion that there were little things occurring in inexplicable ways to machinery at the wrong times. So things would occur, things would break otherwise, and the idea then became that the influence of the operators or the pilots were having an adverse effect on the machinery, thereby establishing PK, and then establishing the notion that through stress or ionization, one could invoke those abilities in any average person. And that was basically what was happening, is that pilots themselves were affecting their own machinery. So that's sort of what evolved from the notion of gremlins. So then a couple other references from the bibliography here. Parapsychology in the Soviet Union, organization's interests. There's some sanitized portion there. And then Westinghouse scientists try to harness mental telepathy. So I personally know that some of these things exist, and actually these groups exist. I'm not going to reference how or why just yet because there's a lot of reading to be done and a lot of research by the onlooker, the average person right now. So I'll continue. New York Herald Tribune, Robert C. Toth, 1958. All right, so chapter 5. I'm going to stop this here. This is a smaller chapter, and then I'll pick up on chapter 5.